Over the years, different gaming genres have risen and fallen in popularity. The last 5 or 6 years, Battle Royale games have been hugely popular. Before that, you had like sporting and shooter games. Years ago, we're talking like early 90s, fighting games were all the rage. Chances are, depending on your age, you'll have grown up and have great feelings of nostalgia towards a particular genre. It's a bit scary to think that in 15 years' time, you'll have adults reminiscing about the glory days of Fortnite, Apex Legends or Fall Guys. Now, anyone who's seen a couple of videos on this channel will know my console of choice growing up was the Nintendo 64. In fact, a few weeks ago I did a video looking at games I'd love to see from that system on the Switch. I'll leave a link up there for you if you want to watch that video. For me, many of my fondest memories on that system, and the genre which really gives me a sense of gaming nostalgia, is the 3D platform era. The Nintendo 64 was awash with them. It was really the first console that brought 3D gaming to the masses, and boy did they run with it. From arguably one of the greatest launch games of all time, Super Mario 64, to Banjo-Kazooie and even Donkey Kong in 3D, Nintendo at the time really seemed to grasp what made a good 3D platforming game. Since then, 3D platform games have always been around in some capacity, although it might be argued that compared to the 64's era, this genre has never really reached the heights of its heyday. Platforming in the third dimension has always held some sort of presence in every console since then. What I want to do with this video is look at just some of Nintendo Switch's offering in this genre to see if they are worth your time, and if they can capture some of the nostalgia and the magic that made them so popular back in the day. Let's start off with one of the big guns. I'm going to start by briefly talking about Super Mario 3D All-Stars, which is a game which showcases 3 3D Mario games from years gone by. You've got Super Mario 64 from the N64, Super Mario Sunshine from the GameCube, and Super Mario Galaxy from the Nintendo Wii. Now, I'll say I'll briefly talk about these games because 1, these are old games that have been remastered-ish, so chances are you'll have played one, if not more, or more than one of these games before. 2, soon you might struggle to get the game as Nintendo have decided to stop releasing it and making it. No idea why. And 3, because I've got a video listing my favourite 3D Mario outings coming up, so you know, there's that. I will say this though, in my opinion, Mario 3D games have always represented the pinnacle of 3D platforming. These are 3 of the best. They all play very, very well on the Switch and all look fab. Now, I know there were some complaints at the time of release that these aren't full remakes that some fans were looking for, but for me they still look pretty good. If you've missed playing any of these games prior to the Switch release, this game is a great way to play them. All 3 of them have different and unique ideas and mechanics that differentiate them not only from each other, but also from other 3D platforming games. One similarity, however, is that all of them feature like a hub world whereby you enter different levels by jumping into like paintings or wall splodgers or galaxies to complete missions. By completing these missions, you earn collectibles that further the story along. Now, none of the games have a deep, hard-hitting, intricate story, but to be honest, you don't really expect that with this kind of game. It's really, you know, there's a villain, usually Bowser, and you've got to stop him. But what the games lack in story, they more than make up for in gameplay. The platforming is super tight. The inventiveness of the level design is truly remarkable. The soundtracks are all wonderful, and the overall fun factor is truly off the scales with these games. What I will say is, if you are looking for a masterclass in 3D platforming games, if you can find it, well, you can't go too far wrong with 3D Mario All-Stars. The next game I have to talk about is one which you may be less familiar with. A Hat in Time is a game created by a small games developer, Gears for Breakfast. The game was originally a Kickstarter back in 2014. The game smashed its target and was eventually released in 2017 on PlayStation and Xbox, and appeared in 2019 on the Nintendo Switch. A Hat in Time sees the protagonist, Hat Kid, being stopped in her spaceship by the Mafia, who are looking for toll payment for her flying above Mafia Town. It's not exactly true to life, this one. Anyway, in the hullabaloo of all that going on, the fuel that powers Hat Kid's ship flies out the window and scatters all over the galaxy below. It's your job to traverse the different worlds looking for the rocket fuel in order to send Hat Kid back home. There's a little more to the story, but I'll let you figure the rest out for yourself. Anyway, you could tell by playing the game for a few minutes that this game is heavily inspired by old 3D platforming gems. I mean, you just have to look at the original Kickstarter. It sort of says it there. Anyway, in terms of how the game plays, it does play as a classic, you might say, like Mario clone in many ways. The actions are all there, the jumps, the double jumps, the long jumps, the attack. And what makes this game unique, however, is the hat swapping ability, which gives you different powers depending on the hat you're wearing. For instance, you have a hat that makes you run quicker, a hat that makes you turn into a weird eye statue, and there's a few others as well. It's a nice way to add new techniques and moves to your character. In my opinion, the strongest assets of this game are the level design and the challenges you encounter to traverse the story in these levels. Also, the really cool characters you encounter along the way. For a 3D platforming game, I was incredibly impressed by the inventive scenarios the game throws at you. It has some really cool settings. There's like a train murder mystery setting, a Twilight Saga zone, and even a level which is like an open world free roam area, much as like you see in Mario Odyssey, which I'll get onto a little bit later. Anyway, as I've already said, the characters are really fun, with lots of personality and are all well voice acted. Now, I've said before, voice acting can be very hit and miss in video games, but I found the variety of accents and the way in which they're presented in this game as quite competent and quite cute and funny. Now, I'm not going to go on and on about the loads of different collectibles and everything about the game in this short segment, but I will say the game as a whole is a lot of fun and definitely worth checking out if you miss the 3D platforming games of old. There are a couple of niggles that are probably worth mentioning and are a little annoying. Firstly, there are a couple of performance issues on the Switch. At no point did they make the game unplayable, but there were occasions where the game would freeze and skip for a small amount of time, I mean like minuscule amount of time. Didn't detract from the fun, but I did notice it occasionally. The load times are quite long as well, especially when you first boot up the game. To be honest, I genuinely thought there was an issue with a copy of the game I bought, as it took so long to start up initially. It's a little annoyance, but it is noticeable. A third thing, and to be honest, you could say this about most of the games in this video, and I probably will later on, and that's the annoying camera angle you have to deal with, like the camera. It's aggravating that an issue that seems to have been present since day one on platform games has yet to be solved in its entirety to this day. The camera angles are at times just odd. There's occasions where the camera will just zoom in on your back, or turn through the character, or face platforms in such a way where you can't tell how far you are away from them. It just means that sometimes you'll end up attaining like cheap deaths. Anyway, as I say, these are just small niggles. Putting them aside, A Hat in Time is a fun little platformer. It's not the most polished game in the world, but if you are looking for a 3D throwback adventure with fantastic level design and interesting characters, you should definitely check this one out. A few months ago now, I did my first video for the channel looking at soothing games on the Switch. If I'd have played this next game before doing that video, I'd have probably included it on that list as well. Diblob 2 is a slight remaster of a Wii game released in 2011. It's also a sequel, hence 2. But I've never played the first game, so here's the second one. Anyway, the game is a unique puzzle 3D platformer that sees you, a colourful blob, move around different world levels to bring colour back to the world and catch the diabolical Comrade Black, who's set on turning the world all grey and like dreary. The gameplay's simple enough. You acquire a colour by jumping in coloured pools and colour the environment by like sliding over it. It's sort of a platformer equivalent of a colouring book. As you move through the levels and colour it in, the world almost comes to life, becoming more animated and vibrant. It's a really clever mechanic and encourages you to explore each level to colour everything you see. You'll often have to mix different colours to create new shades to paint buildings in a particular colour. For example, like blue and yellow, make green, that kind of thing. There's also some cool 2D platforming sections where you find yourself interacting with levers and buttons to escape certain areas. These 2D areas are cleverly integrated into the main story at various points. One thing I do love about this game is the cute and funny story cutscenes. They're very well animated and give me like a DreamWorks Nickelodeon vibe. Seems as though inspiration has been taken from other media and take full advantage of the love of like the Minions and like Rabbids, for instance, with their gibbering language and cute reactions. To be honest, I do think this game is probably targeted towards younger kids. Although there are 2 difficulty levels at the start of the game, easy and normal, realistically you shouldn't really have any problems with normal. It's not a hard game. I think you'll probably get the most enjoyment from this game if you go into it thinking that it's more of like a chilled out time killer than a hardcore platforming experience. As with A Hat in Time, the camera's a bit of a nuisance, but in my opinion not quite as much with this game. Also, the painting the environment idea might start to get a little monotonous after the first couple of levels, as I've said, it's a fairly easy game. Overall though, I had a good time with Diblob 2. It's a cute, well-made, well-executed platformer that I'm glad to see on the system. If you're looking for something a little different from the norm, definitely consider this one. Also, you can pick this up cheap. I mean, I got the physical for less than like £10, which is like $12, which I honestly think is a little bit of a bargain. Or €10. Anyway, it's cheap. I think now will probably be a good time to look at probably the most well-known 3D platform game currently on the Switch, and to be fair, it's probably for good reason. Super Mario Odyssey is the latest full-fledged 3D Mario game. I know we got Mario 3D World and Bowser's Fury, but for me, Mario Odyssey is more of like a platform game, similar to the games of old. It's more of a spiritual successor to Mario 64 and like Galaxy. I'm not going to go into every little detail of this game, as I like to think one day I'm going to make a dedicated video focusing on this monster of a game, if I can be bothered. Just know that this game is a fantastic addition to the 3D Mario series. It sees you as Mario trying to save Peach, who's been kidnapped, again by Bowser, for some kind of forced marriage. You traverse different levels via this cool looking airship. Within each level there are hundreds, literally hundreds, of Power Moons to collect. You'll see a good few similarities between this game and older 3D Mario titles in regards to how Mario controls. The familiar jump, double jump, triple jump, long jump, backflip, they're all back. The little plumber is as refined as he's ever been. The game also looks incredible. It does feel like a continuation of the series. As with any good 3D Mario game, Super Mario Odyssey brings in new elements and makes the experience a little different from the previous adventures. Just looking at older games, for example, you've got like Super Mario Galaxy with the idea of running around small planets. Sunshine, you had Flood, the water hose thing. Mario 64 was, well, like the first one, so everything was new and different. Mario Odyssey brings in Cappy, the cap. With Cappy you can take over and control animals and statues to give you new and different abilities. It's a very interesting and unique ability that is completely different to anything I've seen before. What also differentiates this game from any Mario game before is the way in which you pick up collectibles. In every other Mario game you start from a hub world, then enter new levels to complete a particular task or challenge. Once you've completed this challenge, you're promptly kicked out to then re-enter to start a new challenge. Super Mario Odyssey, however, sees you enter a new open world level from an overview map. Then once you enter a world and pick up a collectible or a moon, you're left in the level. This means that there's no re-entering of levels to complete new challenges. What this does is it massively encourages exploration, certainly more than any other 3D Mario outing before it. It's definitely a sidestep for the genre, and I do feel like it does drag Mario further into the 21st century. Now, whether I think this is for the best and whether I prefer this mechanic more to older 3D titles are really two different questions. I'll answer that at a later time, but what I will say that this is certainly a must-have game for the Switch owners. It's fun, it's crisp, it's joyful, it's everything you'd really ever want from a Mario game on the Switch. Now for a game which some of you may or may not have had the chance to play, or at least if you haven't, you may have had the chance to play the second outing of this duo in the Impossible Lair, and that is Yooka-Laylee. For anybody who doesn't know, Yooka-Laylee is the brainchild of many of the same developers as Banjo-Kazooie on the N64, which, FYI, is in my top 5 games of all time. So the bar was set pretty high for this game prior to launch. From the get-go, the similarities between the two games are pretty clear. The music, the funny way in which the characters converse, and the quirky character design will all be pretty familiar to Banjo lovers. The aim of this game is to traverse various worlds to pick up pages, which are pages of an all-powerful book, and to stop the diabolical Capital B and his terrifying sidekick, Dr. Quack, from taking the pages for themselves and controlling the world. It's a pretty powerful book. Anyway, along the way you'll come across different challenges and puzzles that you'll have to work out to gain more pages. As with Banjo-Kazooie, there are numerous different abilities you can acquire along your adventure, and these new moves must be used to collect other pages and collectibles. Bit Metroid-ish in that respect. A little bit of backtracking. The worlds are vibrant and unique, and the challenges are generally very fun to navigate. They can actually as well be quite challenging as you move further and further into the game. Visuals are very good on the Switch, both in handheld and docked mode. You shouldn't really find a noticeable dip in quality between the two, and the music, although not quite as memorable as games of old, do have some high points. Now, I can't say this is the perfect 3D platformer. It does have a couple of issues which does stop it from being a top tier 3D platform contender for me. The camera isn't the worst in this genre, as you can take full control of it, unlike iterations of the game on other consoles, where apparently you couldn't. But there were a couple of occasions where I did find the camera angles a little frustrating. Also, although the levels are generally fun and exciting places to be, I personally did find some areas that didn't quite live up to 3D platformers of old. They just came across a little bit like bland and a bit boring in some areas. However, the biggest issue for me with the game was the lack of soul in the game. This is probably just a personal gripe, but I did find that some of the characters and the humour came across as like a little bit flat. I actually thought that it might have just been me getting older and not appreciating the same kind of humour as I did back in the 90s. But I did go back and play Banjo-Kazooie for my N64 video I made, and I found that as charming as ever. I don't know, I just found the characters and humour a little bit too forced at this time. Also, the game doesn't really move the genre of 3D platformers on at all, like for example Mario Odyssey. There's nothing really unique about this one. Honestly, this game could have quite easily been released back in the late 90s and fit right in. Maybe with slightly more like washed out graphics. That being said, anybody who doesn't want to move forward and is quite happy stuck in the past should be pretty happy with this game. Also, just note as well that this game is featured in the offer section of the eShop quite a lot, so you should be able to get it for a pretty good price. You should also know as well, I mentioned it earlier on, but the second outing, Yooka-Laylee's Impossible Lair, is in my opinion probably the superior game. It is a 2.5D game, which is why it isn't included in this list. But that game really is superb and actually probably in my top 10 games on the Switch. So check that one out if you love Donkey Kong Country kind of games. It's very similar to that kind of thing. The final game I want to touch on is an offering from Playful Studios. It's a game I've talked about before on my very first video on the channel, so go watch that one if you fancy, and that is New Super Lucky's Tale. Originally an Xbox exclusive, New Super Lucky's Tale is an updated and reworked version of Super Lucky's Tale, which originally appeared on the Xbox One in 2017, hence New Super Lucky's Tale. Anyway, the game sees Lucky, a plucky fox, and a group of dastardly kitty cats, the Kitty Litter, being sucked into a powerful and mysterious book, known as the Book of Ages. It's up to Lucky to retrieve the pages of the Book of Ages that have been scattered around the various worlds when they were sucked into the book, in order to find them to be able to traverse and get back home. It's not the deepest story, but you know, it doesn't really have to be. There are other collectibles to gather if you want 100% the game, like the Lucky Letters, but if you just want to zoom your way through, you're focusing on the pages. Anyway, what does make this game different is the ability to dig underground and move around to get under certain gates and obstacles. This is seamless and a lovely unique ability that I don't think I've really seen in another 3D platforming game that I can think of. This version of the game also includes costumes you can collect, which is a nice little addition to the game. One thing I will say about this one is that it is very easy. I mean, if you're experienced in the genre, there'll be little to no challenge here. That doesn't mean it's not fun, but it's not a game to challenge you. To be honest, I don't think it ever really intended to be a super difficult game to begin with. What I will say is that New Super Lucky's Tale does everything it seemed to set out to do very, very well, and is perfect as an introductory 3D platformer. If you're somebody who doesn't have any experience with this genre, or you're looking to buy it for like a kid, this is probably an ideal starting point. It's cute, it's polished, it plays incredibly well, and the story and characters are charming. It's actually one of the only games on the Switch that I've completed 100%. Now granted, it was because it was so easy to finish and I wanted to get the most for my money, but still, I had a lot of fun doing it, and I recommend you give it a go as well. Anyway guys, that was just 7 3D platform games on the Nintendo Switch system that I've been playing recently. If, like me, you grew up with these kinds of games, you're sure to find one you love out of these. And if not, well, you're probably a bit picky, really. I know there are a good few more on the Switch, and I'm probably sure to talk about them at some point. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Just as an FYI as well, obviously we've got E3 happening right now. I will be putting my reaction video up for the Nintendo section of that, but be sure that I will be watching all of it. So really, I want to say looking forward to it, but by the time this video goes out, I'll be watching it. So yeah, it'll be good. Anyway, thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.